I joked that my neighbor should join my road trip. She said, okay, like she'd been waiting. The suitcase was already in the trunk when I knocked on her door as a joke, never expecting that one careless sentence would crack open a secret she had been carrying alone for 11 years. I had been planning this road trip for months. Nothing complicated, just me, my old silver sedan, a loose route down the coast, and 3 weeks of silence I desperately needed after a year that had worn me down to nothing. My name is Daniel, I am 34, and up until that morning my biggest concern was whether my tires could survive the mountain roads. I had no idea that a throwaway comment to my neighbor would change the course of both our lives. Her name was Margaret. She lived 2 doors down, a soft-spoken woman in her early 60s who watered her flowers every morning at exactly 7, rain or shine, like it was a ritual holding her entire world together. We were not close. We were the kind of neighbors who wave, who comment on the weather, who bring in each other's trash bins without being asked. I knew she had lost her husband some years back. I knew she rarely left the house except for groceries and church on Sundays. That was the extent of my knowledge about her life. That morning, loading my bags into the car, I saw her standing at her mailbox, staring at an envelope like it might bite her. She looked smaller than usual, hollowed out somehow. I called out, half joking, the kind of thing you say to fill a silence rather than because you mean it. I told her she should come with me, that I had an extra seat and nowhere important to be. I expected a polite laugh, a wave of the hand, "You're so funny, Daniel," before she went back inside. Instead, she looked at me for a long moment, and something shifted behind her eyes. She said, "Okay," so quietly I almost missed it, but there was a weight behind that single word, like she had been waiting years for someone, anyone, to ask her to leave. If this story about unexpected kindness and second chances is already touching something in you, take a moment to like this video, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes people can still surprise us, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss what happens next. I stood there stunned, half wondering if she had misunderstood me, if this was some kind of misplaced politeness. But she was already turning back toward her house, saying she needed 15 minutes to pack a bag. 15 minutes. As if she had been rehearsing this exact moment in her mind for a long time, waiting only for the invitation. She came back down her steps with a single worn suitcase, a cardigan draped over her arm despite the summer heat, and an expression I could not quite place. Somewhere between fear and relief. She got into my passenger seat like she was stepping onto a lifeboat, and we pulled out of our quiet street without either of us really knowing what we had just agreed to. The first few hours were awkward in the way that strangers thrown together always are. We talked about nothing, the weather, the radio stations fading in and out, a diner she remembered from decades ago that might or might not still exist along our route. But somewhere around the second state line, something in her began to unravel, slowly, like a knot loosening after years of being pulled tight. She told me about her husband, Walter, how he had been sick for 3 years before he passed, how she had spent that entire time as his nurse, his advocate, his shield against a world that kept trying to take pieces of him faster than she could protect them. She told me how after he died, she simply stopped. Stopped making plans, stopped dreaming, stopped believing that her life still belonged to her in any meaningful way. She had spent 11 years, she said, existing rather than living, watering flowers because it was the only thing left that still needed her. I asked her, gently, why she said yes to me that morning. She was quiet for a long time, watching the fields blur past the window. Then she told me about the letter in her hand when I saw her at the mailbox. It was from her estranged daughter, a woman named Claire she had not spoken to in nearly a decade, ever since a fight so bitter and so stupid that neither of them could remember exactly how it started, only that neither had been willing to be the one to reach out first. The letter said Claire was getting married. It was an invitation, cold and formal, clearly written more out of obligation than desire. Margaret said she had been standing there trying to decide if she even deserved to go, if showing up after all these years would just be another kind of intrusion. And then I had called out my joke about the road trip, and something in her had simply broken open. She said it felt like a sign, however small, however coincidental, that maybe the universe was nudging her back toward motion after over a decade of standing still. I did not plan for this trip to become anything other than my own selfish escape. But somewhere along that highway, I made a decision that surprised even me. I asked her where Claire lived. It turned out to be almost directly along the route I had already mapped out, a small coincidence that felt like it might have been something more. The next several days blurred into something neither of us expected. We stopped at roadside towns Margaret had visited decades earlier with Walter, and she would stand in front of buildings that had changed beyond recognition, tears quietly slipping down her face, not from sadness exactly, but from the strange ache of remembering who she used to be. She started laughing more, tentatively at first, like she was testing whether she still remembered how. She began ordering food she had not let herself enjoy in years, buying a ridiculous straw hat at a gas station because it made her feel, in her words, like a woman with somewhere to be. But beneath the lightness, there was a growing tension neither of us spoke about directly. Every mile that brought us closer to Claire's town also brought Margaret closer to a fear she had been avoiding for 11 years. What if her daughter did not want her there? What if the invitation truly was just obligation, and showing up would only reopen wounds neither of them had ever properly healed? Some mornings she would wake up and quietly suggest we skip that town entirely, find somewhere else to explore instead. And every time, I gently pushed back, not because I had any right to interfere in her life, but because I had started to see something in her that I did not think she could see in herself. A woman who had spent over a decade punishing herself for a fight she barely remembered starting, terrified that reaching out again would mean facing rejection she was not sure she could survive. The night before we arrived, Margaret barely slept. I heard her moving around the motel room, pacing, and eventually I got up too, and we sat outside on plastic chairs beneath a sky thick with stars neither of us could name. She told me she was terrified that Claire had only invited her because it would look strange not to, that maybe 11 years was simply too long a silence to undo with a single afternoon. I did not have any wisdom profound enough to fix that fear. All I could offer was that showing up, even frightened, even uncertain, was still infinitely better than the alternative she had been living with for 11 years, which was not showing up at all. Sometimes, I told her, the bravest thing a person can do is simply appear, and let whatever happens next happen, rather than deciding the ending before the story has even had a chance to unfold. The next afternoon, we pulled up outside a small chapel decorated simply with white flowers, and Margaret sat frozen in the passenger seat for nearly 10 minutes before she found the courage to open the door. I watched her walk slowly toward the entrance, her hands trembling, her posture the posture of someone bracing for impact. And then the door opened, and a young woman stepped out, clearly the bride, clearly Claire, and for a moment neither of them moved. It was Claire who broke first, her carefully composed expression collapsing into something raw and unguarded, and she crossed the distance between them in 3 quick steps and folded into her mother's arms like no time had passed at all. I watched from the car as 11 years of silence dissolved into quiet, desperate sobbing, 2 women finally allowing themselves to need each other again. I did not go inside the chapel. That moment did not belong to me. I simply stood by my car, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something loosen in my own chest too, some weight I had not even realized I was carrying. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you that it is never too late to reach out, to show up, to try again, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment. I read every single one, and I would love to know if this story touched you the way it touched me while living it. Before I tell you how the trip ended, I want to ask you something. If you have someone in your life you have been meaning to call, someone you have let silence grow between out of pride or fear or simple avoidance, comment below with just one word, today, if you promise yourself you will finally reach out to them. Margaret ended up staying 3 extra days in that town, mending a relationship with her daughter I don't think either of them ever believed could be repaired. When I finally continued my road trip alone, she chose to stay behind, chose life over the quiet standstill she had been living in for over a decade. We still talk every week now. She waters her flowers each morning, but she also travels now, she also laughs freely now, she also, finally, lives. What started as a careless joke on an ordinary morning became the thing that gave a grieving woman her life back, and gave me, somehow, an unexpected reminder that the smallest gestures we offer each other, even the ones we do not mean seriously, can sometimes become the exact invitation someone else has been silently praying for.